My name is Claire Whitfield, and 3 months ago, I found out my husband had been lying to me for 11 years. I'm 32. I live in a quiet suburb outside Manchester, in a house that always felt a little too big for two people. My husband, Daniel, works or worked. I thought as a delivery driver for a logistics company. Long hours, early mornings, tired eyes at night. I never questioned it. Why would I? He came home smelling like diesel and coffee, complained about traffic on the M60, and fell asleep on the sofa more nights than not. We didn't have much. A modest two-bedroom house we were still paying off, a car that made a strange noise every time it turned left, and a marriage I believed was built on nothing but honesty. I worked as a receptionist at a dental clinic, nothing glamorous. I budgeted our groceries down to the pound. When Daniel said money was tight, I believed him. When he said we couldn't afford a holiday this year, I believed that too. I never once thought to ask why a delivery driver's phone had 3 different email accounts, or why he sometimes stepped outside to take calls he never explained. My mother used to say, "Claire, you trust too easily." I used to think that was a compliment. It was a Tuesday evening when everything started to unravel. I'd gone to drop off his forgotten lunch bag at the depot, a rare thing, since he usually left before I woke up. The woman at the front desk looked at me strangely when I gave his name. "I'm sorry, love," she said. "We don't have anyone called Daniel Whitfield working here." Not anymore. Not for years, actually. I stood there holding a paper bag with a ham sandwich inside, feeling the ground shift under me. "That's not possible," I said. "He leaves for this job every single morning." She just shrugged, already looking past me at the next person in line. That night, I didn't confront him. I watched him instead, watched him kiss my forehead, ask about my day, complain about a fictional shift that apparently never happened. I smiled, I nodded, and for the first time in 11 years of marriage, I lied back. Because if my husband had been pretending to be someone for over a decade, I needed to know exactly who he really was before I let him know that I knew anything at all. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside Daniel, listening to his slow, steady breathing, and wondered how a man could lie so peacefully. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I followed him. I told him I had a dentist appointment before work, took my own car, and parked 2 streets away from our house, low in my seat like some woman in a cheap thriller. At 6:45, right on schedule, Daniel walked out in his gray work jacket, lunch bag in hand, and got into his car. But he didn't drive toward the depot. He drove toward the city center. I followed at a careful distance, my heart hammering against my ribs. He pulled into an underground car park, beneath a glass office building, the kind with a name in gold letters I didn't recognize. Pemberton Holdings. I watched him disappear into the elevator, still wearing his gray delivery jacket. 20 minutes later, curiosity got the better of me. I walked into the lobby, pretending to check my phone, and asked the receptionist if I could leave a message for someone in the building. "Which company, ma'am?" "I'm not sure," I said. "I'm looking for someone named Daniel Whitfield." She typed the name, frowned, then looked up at the directory board behind her. "We don't have a Daniel Whitfield." "But," she paused, tilting her head. "Are you sure it's not Daniel Pemberton? He's one of the directors here. Owns half the building, actually." The word director hit me like cold water. "No," I said quickly. "Must be the wrong building. Sorry to bother you." I walked out on legs that didn't feel like mine. Pemberton. My husband's name was Whitfield. Or was it? 11 years of marriage, and I suddenly wasn't sure I knew his real surname. That evening, he came home the same way he always did. Tired eyes. Complaints about traffic. A kiss on my forehead like nothing in the world had changed. I made dinner. I asked about his day. He told me about a difficult delivery in Stockport that, I now knew, never happened. I smiled and said, "Sounds exhausting." But underneath the table, my hands were shaking. Because if Daniel Whitfield was really Daniel Pemberton, a director of some company I'd never heard of, driving a car that cost more than our house, then everything about our marriage, our budget, our modest little life, had been a performance. And performances, I was beginning to realize, always have a reason. I just didn't yet know if I was the audience or the target. I spent the next few days pretending to be the same woman. I'd always been a tired receptionist, dutiful wife, grateful for whatever small kindness came her way. But inside, I was building a case. I started small. I checked our joint bank statements more carefully. Everything looked ordinary. His salary, deposited monthly from something called DW Logistics Services, a shell, I now suspected, feeding just enough money into our account to keep the illusion alive. Then I found the second phone. It was hidden in the lining of his gym bag, an old habit of his I'd never questioned because I trusted him. The phone was locked, but the screen lit up with a notification I didn't need a password to read. Board meeting moved to 9 a.m. Pemberton Holding, Daniel. My hands went cold. I searched the company name online that night while he slept. Pemberton Holdings wasn't small. It owned property across 3 cities, a wholage empire, and, according to one article, had recently been the subject of a bitter family dispute. After the founder's death 2 years ago, the founder's name was Richard Pemberton, his only son and heir, Daniel Pemberton. I sat on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m., phone light illuminating my face, and read every article I could find. Interviews Daniel had clearly avoided. A photo from a charity gala, blurry, half his face turned away from the camera. But it was him. Same jaw, same small scar above his eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident he'd told me about on our second date. Why would a millionaire, because that's what he was, I now understood. A millionaire, pretend for 11 years to be a delivery driver married to a dental receptionist? I thought back over our marriage with new eyes. The coincidental way we'd met at a laundromat when my machine broke down. The way he'd always known exactly how much things cost, down to the penny, like a man performing poverty rather than living it. The way he never once let me visit his workplace. Not truly. Always some excuse. Some reason it was inconvenient. Had he chosen me? Studied me? Tested me? Or worse, had someone sent him? I closed the articles, deleted my search history with trembling fingers, and climbed back into bed beside a man I no longer recognized. The next morning, an envelope arrived. No return address. Just my name, typed neatly across the front. Inside was a single photograph. Daniel, in an expensive suit, shaking hands with another woman outside a lawyer's office, and on the back, in careful handwriting, ask him about the will before it's too late. I hid the photograph inside my old sewing box, tucked beneath fabric scraps Daniel would never touch. For 3 days, I said nothing. I smiled at breakfast. I packed his lunch bag like always, even though I now knew it was theater, a prop for a role he'd been playing since before I ever loved him. But the handwriting on the back of that photograph haunted me. Ask him about the will before it's too late. Someone out there knew my life better than I did. I decided to find the woman in the photograph. It wasn't hard. The lawyer's office had a small brass plate outside Holbrook and Associates, a state law. I called under a false name, claiming I was researching probate solicitors for a family matter, and the receptionist mentioned almost carelessly that Mr. Holbrook's firm handled the Pemberton estate. My stomach turned. I waited outside the building the next afternoon, telling Daniel I had a late shift at the clinic. When the woman from the photo walked out, mid-40s, sharp suit, confident stride, I approached her before I could talk myself out of it. "Excuse me," I said. "I think you know my husband, Daniel Pemberton." Her expression didn't shift the way I expected. No surprise, only something colder, recognition, maybe pity. "You must be Claire," she said quietly. My blood ran cold. She knew my name. "I'm Diane Holbrook," she continued. "I handled Richard Pemberton's estate after he passed. I really shouldn't be discussing this with you, but you deserve to know something." "Know what?" She hesitated, glancing at the building behind her like someone might be watching. Richard's will included a clause. Daniel only inherits the company in full if he's... She paused, choosing her words carefully. "If he's proven himself capable of an honest, ordinary life first, married outside his social circle, no scandal, no manipulation, A clean 5 years. The words landed like stones. 5 years, I whispered. We've been married 11, then, she said slowly. Either the clause was satisfied a long time ago, and he chose to keep living this life anyway, or there's something else going on that even I don't fully understand. Before I could ask anything else, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face changed, pale, urgent. I need to go, she said. But Claire, be careful. There are people in that family who would benefit greatly if something happened to Daniel before he claims full control. People who are still watching both of you. She turned and walked briskly away, leaving me standing on the pavement, heart pounding. Because if someone was watching us, I needed to know who. And that night when I got home, Daniel was standing in our kitchen, holding my sewing box wide open in his hands. I hid the photograph inside my old sewing box, tucked beneath fabric scraps Daniel would never touch. For 3 days, I said nothing. I smiled at breakfast. I packed his lunch bag like always, even though I now knew it was theater, a prop for a role he'd been playing since before I ever loved him. But the handwriting on the back of that photograph haunted me. Ask him about the will before it's too late. Someone out there knew my life better than I did. I decided to find the woman in the photograph. It wasn't hard. The lawyer's office had a small brass plate outside Holbrook and Associates, a state law. I called under a false name, claiming I was researching probate solicitors for a family matter, and the receptionist mentioned almost carelessly that Mr. Holbrook's firm handled the Pemberton estate. My stomach turned. I waited outside the building the next afternoon, telling Daniel I had a late shift at the clinic. When the woman from the photo walked out, mid-40s, sharp suit, confident stride, I approached her before I could talk myself out of it. "Excuse me," I said. "I think you know my husband, Daniel Pemberton." Her expression didn't shift the way I expected. No surprise, only something colder, recognition, maybe pity. "You must be Claire," she said quietly. My blood ran cold. She knew my name. "I'm Diane Holbrook," she continued. "I handled Richard Pemberton's estate after he passed. I really shouldn't be discussing this with you, but you deserve to know something." "Know what?" She hesitated, glancing at the building behind her like someone might be watching. Richard's will included a clause. Daniel only inherits the company in full if he's... She paused, choosing her words carefully. "If he's proven himself capable of an honest, ordinary life first, married outside his social circle, no scandal, no manipulation, a clean 5 years." The words landed like stones. 5 years, I whispered. "We've been married 11, then," she said slowly. "Either the clause was satisfied a long time ago, and he chose to keep living this life anyway, or there's something else going on that even I don't fully understand." Before I could ask anything else, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face changed, pale, urgent. "I need to go," she said. "But Claire, be careful. There are people in that family who would benefit greatly if something happened to Daniel before he claims full control. People who are still watching both of you." She turned and walked briskly away, leaving me standing on the pavement, heart pounding. Because if someone was watching us, I needed to know who. And that night when I got home, Daniel was standing in our kitchen, holding my sewing box wide open in his hands. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. "Someone followed me?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "How do you even know that?" "Because I've had someone watching you," Daniel said. "Since the moment I suspected Marcus was getting desperate, a private security contact. He's been keeping a discreet eye on the house, on your route to work. 2 nights ago, he clocked a gray sedan trailing your car from the clinic almost all the way home. It peeled off once you turned onto our street. You had someone watching me and you didn't think to mention it? I didn't want to frighten you before I had proof of anything real." "Well, congratulations, Daniel. I'm terrified now. And I still don't have proof of anything except that my husband is a stranger." He flinched at that, but he didn't argue. I sat down at the kitchen table then, my legs finally giving out from under the weight of everything. Daniel sat across from me, and for a moment, He looked less like Daniel Pemberton, heir to a fortune, and more like the tired man who used to fall asleep on our sofa. Maybe that part had never been an act. I need to see the will, I said. All of it. Not Diane's summary. The actual document. It's complicated. Everything about you is complicated, Daniel. I've spent 11 years married to a man who edited his own life for me like a script. I am done being handed pieces. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Tomorrow, I'll take you to Diane's office myself. You'll see everything, the will, the trust, all of it. And Marcus? Daniel's expression hardened. Marcus has spent 2 years trying to prove I'm unfit to inherit, mentally, financially, morally. If he finds out you know the truth now, before I've formally claimed the company, he'll use it. He'll say I manipulated you, that our whole marriage was a manufactured performance to satisfy the will's conditions. He'll paint you as a pawn, not a wife. Maybe I was a pawn, I said quietly. I just don't know for how long. Daniel reached across the table for my hand. I let him take it, though every part of me wanted to pull away. Claire, whatever you decide about us, I need you safe first. Tomorrow, after we see the will, I'm going to tell you something else. Something about the night my father died. Something Marcus doesn't know I know. My chest tightened. What is it? He glanced toward the darkened window one more time, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. I don't think my father's death was an accident. I didn't sleep again that night. Daniel sat beside me on the bed, not touching me, just talking finally, after 11 years actually talking. My father had a heart condition, he said. Controlled, medicated, stable for years. The night he died, his doctor said his potassium levels were dangerously abnormal, enough to trigger cardiac arrest. Nobody questioned it at the time. He was 71. Everyone assumed his heart simply gave out, but you didn't believe that. Not after I found out Marcus had visited him alone that evening. Not after the housekeeper mentioned my father seemed unusually disoriented after a cup of tea. Marcus had brought him himself. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. I had no proof. Still don't. Just a feeling I couldn't shake. And a will that made Marcus furious the moment it was read. The next morning, we drove to Diane Holbrook's office together. She looked surprised to see Daniel walk in beside me, his hand at the small of my back no longer hiding anything. You told her, Diane said. She found out on her own, Daniel replied. I'm done making decisions for her. Diane spread the will across her desk. I read every clause slowly, my finger tracing the legal language until I reached the section that made my breath catch. Asterisk, in the event of Daniel Pemberton's death or incapacitation, prior to formal transfer of controlling shares, full inheritance passes to Marcus Pemberton, contingent upon no surviving spousal claim. Asterisk, no surviving spousal claim, I read aloud. Diane, what does that mean exactly? Diane's expression turned grave. It means as long as you're alive and legally married to Daniel at the time of an unfortunate event, you inherit his portion in trust, not Marcus. The room went very quiet. So, if something happened to Daniel, I said slowly, I wouldn't just be a grieving widow. I'd be standing directly between Marcus and everything he wants. Yes, Diane said. Daniel's hand found mine under the desk, gripping tightly. Which means, he said, the gray car following you 2 nights ago wasn't a coincidence, and it wasn't really about me at all. My stomach dropped as the full shape of it settled over me, cold and clear. They're not trying to get rid of you first, Daniel. He nodded slowly, his jaw tight. They're trying to get rid of me. Diane's phone rang on her desk, sharp and sudden in the silence. She glanced at the caller ID and her face went white. It's Marcus's assistant, she whispered. He says Marcus needs to see the will revised. Immediately, today, he says he has new evidence regarding your father's death. Diane put the call on speaker before Marcus's assistant could hang up. What followed was a voice we weren't meant to hear. Marcus himself, impatient, talking to someone in the background. DOES, and a matter what she found. By the time anyone verifies it, I'll already control the shares. Just make sure the toxicology report from my father's file goes missing before Daniel's lawyer requests it. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel went rigid beside me. The line disconnected a second later, the assistant realizing. Too late. The call hadn't fully ended. "That's tampering with evidence," Diane said, already reaching for her phone. "That's obstruction." "That's enough for the police, Daniel. That's enough for everything." Within the hour, Diane had contacted a detective she'd worked with before, a woman named Inspector Reyes who specialized in financial crime. By evening, the recording, the will, the housekeeper's original statement about the tea, and the pathologist's overlooked toxicology notes were all sitting on a detective's desk. It took 11 days. 11 days of police interviews, of Daniel finally standing in front of the Pemberton board as himself, not Daniel Whitfield the driver, not a rumor, but Richard Pemberton's true and rightful heir. 11 days of Marcus's confidant. Smiles slowly collapsing as evidence. Piled against him, a pharmacy record for a potassium supplement he'd never been prescribed, a receipt for a burner phone used to hire the gray sedan, and the recorded call Diane had captured herself. Marcus was arrested on a Thursday morning, charged with the murder of his stepfather and conspiracy to commit the murder of his stepbrother. I watched it on the news from our kitchen, the same kitchen where Daniel had once stood, holding my sewing box, where our marriage had nearly ended in a single conversation, instead of surviving into something real. As for me, I didn't disappear back into the life of Mrs. Pemberton, wife of the heir. I told Daniel plainly I wasn't going to sit in a mansion, being introduced as someone's spouse for the rest of my life. I enrolled in a business course. Within a year, I was managing the charitable foundation Richard Pemberton had started decades earlier, the one Daniel said his father would have wanted, run by someone who understood what it meant to build a life from nothing. Sometimes, in the evenings, Daniel still wears an old gray jacket around the house just to make me laugh. I let him, because underneath every lie he told me, there had been one true thing. A man who fell in love with an ordinary woman before he ever gave her a reason to doubt him. The money never impressed me. The honesty, finally, is what made me stay.